So thanks again for joining us for tonight's webinar, hosted by a collaboration of projects, the Peace River Forge Association of BC, Northern Fireworks, the Peace Region Living Lab, and also our Prescribed Fire project with some funding from the Beef Cattle Research Council, Agriculture and Agri-Food Canada, and the BC Hydro Agricultural Compensation Fund. And I want to welcome our three panelists for tonight. We have Frank Varga, James Thiessen, and Chance Wiebe. And helping me moderate as well is Sonia Leverkus, one of my project partners, and also in the background, Dr. Julian Baynard as well. So, who's also one of the project collaborators. So tonight it's all about people who have done prescribed fire on the land or who had encounters with fire or just thoughts around using prescribed fire for land management. So as a first round of questions, I will ask maybe Jack to go first. And the question is to please introduce yourself. If you can give us kind of a rough idea where you are at in the Peace region, and then kind of the nature of your ranching operation.
Sure, I can do that, Nadia. So I'm Jack Thiessen. My wife and I, my wife Judy and I, and our family, we ranch here at Mile 81 on the Alaska Highway on the Aitken Creek Road. We've been here since 1965. We opened this area up. We built the road in here, and so we took over the ranch from my parents and my aunt and uncle, and we continue to ranch here and to work here as a family operation. We run a cow calf operation in particular. We also do some backgrounding with calves. We're calving 570 head here this year, and that's pretty typical of where we're at. And then we background our calves as well, and sell the calves in the steers we typically sell in January, and then the heifers we sell them in spring. And most of our heifers go for breeding stock. So that's been our goal for quite a few years, is to produce females that can go into other operations. And so that's basically the nature of our operation. We raise our own feed, and we use a lot of fire in order to manage noxious woody weeds and to increase grass quality, and also to hold back fuel for forest fires as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Jack. Chance, if you wouldn't mind going next, giving the same introduction, please.
Okay. Yeah, my name's Chance Wiebe. I am located west of Dawson Creek in the Progress ground birch area. It about halfway between Dawson and Chetwynd. We run a cow-calf operation with yearlings as well. Depending on the years, it'll vary between the two, but usually 200 head of cow-calf and then upwards of 300 head of yearlings. We buy most of our feed, and we run a lot of private ground and rent a lot of ground. We don't currently use much for burning around this area at the moment. It'd be like something we'd like to introduce. However, we have been around a lot of burning. We had a fire last year on the place, and yeah, unfortunately, we lost about 700 bales of feed there, kind of the first part of May. And yeah, growing up, we grew up actually not too far away from Jack, and about 2 years ago, we had to deal with wildfire there. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Chance. And last but certainly not least, Frank, if you can introduce yourself and more so on your forestry operation.
Sure. So my name is Frank Varga. I'm a registered professional forester with the Association of BC Forest Professionals. I operate an area-based tenure community forest in the Nadina district, so just I guess just west of Prince George, kind of halfway between Terrace and PG. The community forest is just over 92,000 hectares in size. And so it is one of the largest actively operating community forests in the province of BC. And it's actually the first community forest that was issued in the province of BC. Fire is definitely an important part of the landscape for us. So most of the forested area around here was regenerated, created by fire, I guess. And it's definitely demonstrating its mighty power in the last few years. Just in 2023, we had a significant fire in the community forest. It was just over 8,200 hectares in size. So it really had a big impact to our timber harvesting land base. It also impacted our midterm timber supply, as most of the area that was burnt was kind of in that 40 to 35 to 60 years range of regenerated pine spruce, some of it from previous fires and some of it through the forest operations that have been done in the past. I guess we're pretty cognizant of fire and what it can do and what its powers are. We have a pretty extensive landscape fire management plan that we've been implementing to try to protect the community, the infrastructure around the community, and of course the value of the timber resource, which keeps these communities going in this part of the world. So I've had the pleasure of working with Dr. Sonia Labrikis through a couple of prescribed fire activities and some training and development. And yeah, looking forward to the discussion.
Excellent. Now, all of you kind of touched a little bit on your experiences with fire, but maybe you can, in this next round, you can just expand a little bit on how you've interacted with fire. Like Chance, for example, you mentioned you did some prescribed fire, but quite some time ago. And maybe if you can share in this next go around why or how you've used it on your land, kind of in terms of a management tool. Why fire and maybe not another tool? Or what other management practices you like to employ to maybe achieve similar effects as fire? So maybe let's go the other way around and let's go to Frank first.
Yeah, you bet. So I kind of touched on it a little bit. So we've used fire in a very prescribed way through professionals that we've hired. We actually completed a couple prescribed fire activities, and that was really for fuel management, reducing the level of fuel loading on the land base. A lot of it as a result of the impacts of mountain pine beetle that we've experienced in this part of the world and most of BC, I guess, but we definitely experienced it to a heightened level since most of these forests are basically pine flats, pine monoculture, so to speak, regenerated. Why fire? Well, I guess it's probably the most effective way to reduce the fuel loading. We've tried different methods and other tools. We've done pretty extensive raking with machinery to try to direct the amount of fuel loading in an area and then burn the piles after the fact, or try to create situations on the landscape where we can then utilize those piles to then carry out a prescribed fire activity. So I guess we've kind of looked at fire as the primary way of bringing it back to the cycle, as it's always been part of this natural cycle, and just seemed to make sense to use fire.
Excellent. Thank you. Chance, if you would go next, please.
Yeah, for us, it's like a lot of it is economics. Uh, like prescribed burning is a lot cheaper than a lot of other alternatives. And you can use it to rejuvenate your grass, and you can brush control, weed control, and at the end of the day, uh, just create a more sustainable environment for for our future when it comes with livestock. So that's pretty much why we look at it that way. Or other alternatives would be, more chemicals and um, or rejuvenating land, which is just cost effective. It's just economics wise, it's a lot better for us, and you can get very similar results.
Thank you, Chance. And Jack, what are your thoughts on that question?
Well, yeah. Well, thanks, Nadia. Definitely, I have some thoughts in this regard. My past experience is extensive. My parents burnt when I was a child. Like I grew up burning in prescribed burning. So burning is something we do a lot of and have done a lot of in the past 55 years that I've been involved with it. Um, and a lot of our goals has been the same as what Chance has already mentioned in regard to brush mitigation. There's some other things that really help, and soil health is one of the things that I would like to touch on, and I think is probably one of the things that probably isn't talked about a lot. When you have a wildfire, you're typically burning down into your duff layer, and you're burning down and you're releasing carbon, and that's part of our ongoing study that we have going, Nadia, that you're aware of in regard to testing our carbons in our deep soil, and so what we have and what we're actually accomplishing with good grass management. But after one of our prescribed burns, and like we did this spring, you can go after that. We've left about a 2-inch stubble as pretty much as what we had this year in the spring, and you can dig down through that duff layer, and it's nice and cool. And so we haven't disturbed any of those microbes of our soil. And yet, what we've done is we've released a lot of that dry grass and the nitrogen that was in it and made it usable for our grass. And so we increase soil health with fire, with proper use of fire. And the reason I say proper is because when we have a wildfire, um, I don't believe that's a proper use to allow fuel loadings to get to a place where they self-ignite and then burn out of control. And while sometimes we get some of the same benefits out of it that you would with prescribed fire, with that you burn way deeper than you want to burn. And when we can burn when the conditions are right, we don't burn our soil and we don't release the carbon. And so, but we do release the nitrogen, which when you look at a burn area, you'll find your grass far more nutrient for the cattle. It's a way darker green. And in fact, um, we have done this, and years ago, Sonia brought some professors up from Oklahoma, and they talked about rotational grazing using only fire to move your cattle, and very interesting, and it works. We've done it here, and it works, and cattle will always move to that better grass where the fire is. So that's basically the reasons why we do it. Um, um, there is some other reasons why. Cost effectiveness is also one of the reasons why we can look after a large area with little cost in comparison to heavy metals. I call it heavy metals. That's yellow machinery. The other avenue that we have available to us now that probably is also a very usable tool, and that's spraying with a drone. Uh, we do have one of those as well, and so we can utilize that aspect on our private land here. Um, it's not as cost effective, and it has its place. But here's some of the downsides to it. Anytime you're using a spray, you're also, even though you have specific sprays for different things, you're also killing off plants that have the potential to be feed for cattle. And so, there's basically nothing you can use that doesn't kill your legumes if you're going to kill trees. And so then you lose your legumes, which are a very intricate part of good soil health and grass management. So my preference definitely is to use the fire. The other alternative is is heavy equipment, yeah, heavy metal, and we have that as well, and we do use that in areas where we can't get a fire to carry through, and and uh, and so we have cats and land clearing equipment, and we have a mulcher as well that works. And we've done some extensive experiments with these different avenues. And by far, we have found that when we can use our fire and we can manage it with fire, our stalking density per foot of grass, plants on the ground, is way superior using fire than any other method that we've used.
Excellent. Thank you for the answers. And you've mentioned all some benefits that you've experienced with the fire or why you're using the fire. Now, let's flip it to the other side a little bit. Fire can also bring a lot of concerns, especially maybe amongst your neighbors or the community. So can you share a little bit, and maybe I'll start with you, Chance, because you mentioned like you're in an area where you do have close neighbors, and that may be hindering you a little bit from doing the prescribed fire. But what are your thoughts on how you would mitigate the concerns, say over smoke impact, or that they worry that the fire will get away on you, or that you may impact infrastructure like power lines that are running by your operation?
I think biggest thing is just to be straight up and honest with everybody. It uh, uh, and if you're gonna do something, like just because it's on your land, and we're pretty prone to a west wind here. So my neighbors to the west are probably going to be impacted with smoke. So that's something that you have to talk to them about and work with them on. And it might not always work out in either one of our favor there that way. Um, we're also in an area that's we have multiple neighbors that are close, and not all places are looked after the same. So we've got a quarter just adjacent to us here on the be on the southeast, and it's I'm not even sure who owns it, but it's just it hasn't been grazed. It hasn't had anything done with it for probably 20 years. So you've got a lot of fuel sitting there, and that's always a concern anytime that you're looking at doing a prescribed burn is how do we stay away from excessive fuel? And yeah, and unfortunately in our area, we're in a spot where, yeah, we've got probably more fuel than kind of your average. Um, between between kind of uh, private land that's not used, and then even our crown land, lot of our crown was pine, and after the pine beetle, most of that pine is laying down now, but it's still a concern for a lightning strike or whatnot that way, and prescribed burning through that is there's just a lot of fuel, and so you're looking at bringing the community together if you want to do something like that, and talk with all your neighbors. And I mean, if one doesn't feel safe, you probably shouldn't go forward with that and look at alternative methods, unfortunately. But um, like last spring, like we had fire start here, uh, in it, some residual feed that we had. And yeah, the community was good. Everybody come together, and yeah, we actually got it handled in a relatively short amount of time. And it could have got really bad. So I think communication is key and not, yeah, just walking everybody through what you're doing.
Thank you, Chance. And Jack, I know you're again in a different situation. You're quite remote and maybe facing some different situations. What's it like for you dealing with the neighbors?
Well, what we have here in within our community is interesting. We also have a number of community members that, in the past have been very against fire, um, quite concerned about fire, quite concerned about prescribed burning, and why fire? Why put fire on the land? Why not do alternate ways? That has changed quite significantly since 2016. Individuals who in the past have been totally against prescribed burning are now asking us and our crew to come and help them burn on their land, from small acreage owners to larger operators. Um, there's a reason for that, but let me just touch a little bit on our policy, what we do as a ranching operation here in regard to our prescribed burn. So when we do our prescribed burn plan, part of that burn plan is to use notification of all of our community members. That enables those who struggle with asthma or smoke, so that they can prepare themselves ahead of time. That if they want to leave the community for the time that they can, and there's one couple that does. Yeah, when we phone and we say when we're going to burn, he'll just leave for the day so that he doesn't have smoke in his in his own lungs. But he's one of the individuals that asks us to come and do prescribed burn on his own place. And a lot of the reason why is, in particular in 2016, of course, in 23 again, and some in 24, we had so much wildfire, and the risk was so huge. And people, we had sparks landing on people's homes and in their yards and lighting fires, and it was just some bad situation there. And that has really awakened a realization that if we don't manage it and do it ourselves, do it well, that it's going to happen somewhere on its own. But then uh, it will be managing us rather than us managing it. So it's really opened up that corridor for be able to communicate with community members and say, hey, this is what we want to do. Here's why we're doing it. And at this point, we have very little opposition to that at this time. As far as, some of these other items at risk, like power lines and things like that, when we do our prescribed burn, we either do a pre-burn around these areas very early on, so that the intensity of the fire when we do our actual burn is mitigated. So typically, if you do a pre-burn around a power pole, you know, if you're going to do it late enough that you get a good burn, you're not going to be able to hold it around the power pole. So if you do it early enough, when you can manage it well, just around each power pole, you're not going to get a complete burn. And so sometimes later on, if we have a 10-foot circle around these poles, sometimes we have to go and do a little raking around some of those really sensitive areas as well. But for the most part, we have had very little overachievement. And so those are some of the management practices that we do in regard to, mitigating the impact on our neighbors. Of course, we also burn, the time we burn, typically, again, like Chance, we tend to have a west wind. And so it's those that are east and northeast of us that are impacted by the smoke. And we just communicate with them and try and burn too when the index is such that the smoke goes up, rather than hanging down.
Thank you so much, Jack. And over to Frank. So for you, I would imagine it's quite different in a treed system.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, both Chance and Jack have kind of hit the key points about just the importance of communication and engagement with the public and or your neighbor. I mean, being that it's a community forest, so we're right around the community of Burns Lake. So basically, you're standing in the middle of Burns Lake and you do a 360, and everywhere you look, every hillside is community forest. And so, because Burns Lake, the town itself, is kind of located in sort of the valley bottom, one of the key issues we always have, even just with simple burning residual piles after harvest, is the high smoke sensitivity, right? So the open burning smoke regulation is pretty specific about when we can and cannot light up, and so that's very restrictive for us. And so that's probably one of the other reasons I didn't mention, but we've tried to default towards obviously using more prescribed fire. We a few have said this before, I'm sure, and I kind of said it a few times around the community. How do you like your smoke, right? Do you want it all summer long, or do you want it controlled under conditions where there's good venting, there is good control, and it's just a much better opportunity to manage all of those negative connotations around what fire sometimes brings about in people. I mean, for us in the community forest, I know that when we do any sort of prescribed fire activities, when we have done the last couple that we have, it's a very extensive public relations, public communications program. We put out significant communication on our social media, on our website, into the local paper. On the day of light up, we have tents set up in the parking lot so people can come vent and tear a strip off us, so to speak, when they see something go up, or if they're concerned and they stop by, or even if they're just driving by and they see that, okay, there's the booths up at the community forest. What is that about? They're more likely to associate the fact that it's a controlled activity that we're carrying out. We even go as far as introducing the concept over multiple months, getting the community, I guess, prepared for it. We have, as part of our license agreement, we have an open house, and it's a barbecue open house. So, we make a whole bunch of burgers for everybody, and they come out and they have sort of a burger on us. And we try to inform them of all our activities that we're doing in the community forest. But especially when we're doing something like a prescribed fire, we really try to emphasize that, hey, this is what we're planning to do. Here's the reasons why we're planning to do this. Do you have any questions? Do you have any concerns? And we'll get feedback. Lots of times, lots of folks are like, yes, this is great. Some will be like, no, absolutely not. Some are right in between. They're like, yeah, I think it's great, but hey, can you send me an email or let me know when you light up, because I have asthma and I want to be inside the house at that time, right? So I think it's just trying to manage the different expectations. And usually if people are reasonable, I guess, then they really come to the realization that we are trying to do the best we can to protect their community and their way of life and the infrastructure that's around it. Has the perspective changed? I would say it has changed a lot. When I took the community forest on back in early 2016, and we started the whole concept of just communication and engagement about the importance of trying to bring fire back to the landscape, it was a really tough sell. We actually have a survey that we do every year as part of our license agreement and license documentation. We ask people how we're doing with different things, and fire is one of the things that we always ask them about. And in the very beginning, it was, yeah, I could support it, but I need more information. But there was a lot more no's than there was a lot of yeses. After people experienced the Nadina fires here, the Shovel Lake fire, our co-op fire in 2023. I mean, we've had lots of fires, 2010, 2016, 2018, 2023. I feel like now people are approaching me and going, hey, when are you going to do the next one? So the perspective has definitely changed, and that is nice to see. Yeah.
That is very interesting how you commented on the perspective changing and just like Jack was saying, the community being more interested in understanding the benefit of the prescribed fire versus the uncontrolled wildfire. And I didn't really put it in so many words in the questions, but do you feel over the time that you've been doing prescribed fire, how has the regulatory requirement been like for you to get permission to burn? Do you feel is that a hurdle that you still manage to get over pretty reasonably?
Can
Any
I start on that one?
Yeah, go ahead. I see you smiling.
Can I can I recluse myself from answering this question so that I don't incriminate myself?
Yes, you can totally do that. That's perfect.
No, no. I'm kidding, but it definitely has not gotten better from an area-based tenure perspective. It seems like it's still very, very difficult to carry the activity out. You know, giving credit obviously to all the organizations that are involved in it, I do realize and understand that there's a lot of liability associated with these these prescriptions and these activities. And we from more recent conversations I've had with individuals in some of those organizations, it sounds like there's definitely a lack of experience to support it, and that creates hesitation. And that's unfortunate, because now more than ever, I think we need to start doing more of it on a landscape, given that it's either going to be us or it's going to be nature. But when nature does it, it's going to look completely different.
Well said. Yes. Jack, how has your experience been over the years?
Where do you want me to start from? From the beginning till now? Well, let me
Oh,
just briefly share that. Okay, so in my younger years, when we were burning with my parents, uh, literally, like we're fairly isolated. We're not as isolated now as we used to be, but we were very isolated. And lots of times during that burn opportunity, when it was there, there wasn't even accessibility to cross the river to get to town. So typically, my dad and my uncle, they would light up these river hills, and then the forestry would fly out with the chopper because they would see the smoke, and then they would give dad and uncle a permit to keep on burning. It doesn't quite happen that way now. Today, it's significantly different. We on our private land, um, every 4 years, we put together an extensive burn plan that is held by the wildfire in Fort St. John, the Forest Service there, or the Wildfire Service there, and uh, and so we put together a burn plan. We put our PIDs of our land on file there, and we put together a burn plan that uh, um, obligates us to certain obligations in regard to managing this fire. And yes, it's a fairly extensive project or program that you have to go through to get it initiated the first time. Once you've got that in place, it's actually quite reasonable to continue to manage it, and especially when you come with years of experience and good results without very much overachievement. Uh, on Crown land, that has really changed for us. We haven't had we haven't had a fire on our Crown range now for many years. We're losing significantly there because we haven't. And when I say that, we haven't had a prescribed burn on our Crown range for a long time. We've had some wildfires on there, which have also been a benefit. They've come with some extreme risks, but they have been a benefit as well. But um, and that's part of what we're working on now, is so that we can actually get back to changing that so that we can use fire on Crown land as well. And the sentiment is changing there as well. There is more interest and more thoughts in giving us the opportunity to use it on Crown land again as well. So basically, I sit in a fairly different realm than what Frank does, in that I'm not operating a community forest. I'm operating on private property, uh, and that's the only burns that we've had in the last years.
Thanks for summarizing that for us, all those many years. And Chance, what are your thoughts on that, the topic of, or the challenges that come with the legal aspect? So you're muted, Sonia.
Chance is on mute as well.
Oh, okay.
Sorry. There I am. I or can you say the question again, please?
So it was mostly like how you felt over time. How hard has it been to get permission to do the burn? And the as kind of the regulations have increased around that, do you find it still reasonable to get through all that and figure out as a producer how to achieve that permission?
I think, yeah, the paperwork can be a little bit daunting there that way, and maybe some a little bit of, maybe there could be some more education put in behind that. Most of the time, I think like someone like myself and other people, you're more worried about liability, and if something does happen. That being said, if you do have a good permit, yeah, and you follow what you have within your plan, you should be covered there that way. But if for some reason you're not, that if something went sideways, you do take on a lot of liability with it. Um, that being said, like within any time that we've had to deal with forestry with burns. They've been really good to deal with. So but yeah, more education probably behind the permits. What someone's looking for there that way on on their end, and then also how a person can fill it out better and do a better job of putting the plan together.
That is really good comment, and we hope with our prescribed fire project we can help a little bit with that by providing a checklist for ranchers to go through to help them work through this paper pile of process. Uh, Kind of to close it out before we open it up for questions from the floor, what are your thoughts on how to move forward with prescribed fire? I heard you say, or some of you were saying, how the appetite is getting, or it's getting more acceptable in the community because they see the difference between prescribed versus wildfire. But what are your thoughts on how we can do better, what we can do to keep this tool available to us in the future? Who would like to go first?
Oh, I can go if you want, or go, Chance, go ahead.
Okay. I think I mean with prescribed burning here in the future, I due to drought and whatnot here that we've had the last 4 years, and people are starting to get a better understanding of what we have for excess fuel that's going to put most of uh, most everybody at risk one day. It doesn't really matter where you're at. I think most areas are very open to prescribed burning. That being said, we have to be successful with it, or we're going to put a bad name on it again, and or just put a bad name on it because if you have one get away on you, that just creates fear, and it doesn't do you any good. But if you don't manage it, uh, you put yourself at a lot of risk. And with the fuel that we have sitting there today, it um, it's gonna it's gonna take a little bit of risk with the first couple fires because you have to eliminate that fuel, which I'm not sure. I think that's what holds most people back today on doing it is the amount of fuel that's sitting there and the risk level behind it. once that's done, the risk level will lower, and I think a lot of people will be a lot more comfortable with it.
Hmm. Jack, it sounded like you had some thoughts as well.
Sure, and I think Chance mentioned some of those already, but I think too that in order to go forward and to go forward safely and legally, that's sort of how you worded it in your question. And safely is having a good burn plan, but I think it's more than that. I think it's having experienced personnel on the ground. We put together with the Peace River Forge Association and Shifting Mosaics. We put together quite a few fire schools uh, last year. We're going to be doing some more fire schools this year as well. And I think those things are important for us to do. Chance talked earlier about education, and I think education is part of the importance of doing this as well. And so these fire schools, I think, are very beneficial in that realm, not only in bringing public awareness and the ability to understand fire and some of the aspects and some of the um, things that surround fire, but also the giving people the confidence to be able to work within it, to manage it, and actually accomplish it. And so, like Chance, I feel too that to do a good job is imperative in being able to keep this tool open. So when we commit to something, we actually do that. And a good example of that is a friend of ours. He bought some land right close to the airport in Fort St. John, and he wanted us to clear that land for him. It was only an acre, and there's a lot on both sides of it, and houses on both sides, and they're 1 acre lots right by the Fort St. John airport. And so, I called the fire center there and asked if I could get a burning permit to burn all those trees and all that bush, and there was no problem getting a permit to do that because of our experience. It was interesting as we were burning there because the fire department showed up and people showed up and but everything was good. And so what we produced there was a good quality, and the neighbors around that said, "Wow, this is great." And I think when we can do some of those high profile things that look maybe really risky and yet they're not, that's going to benefit us in order to be able to maintain the ability to keep doing this um, safely. And of course, when you go and do it legally. Do your due diligence and get your permits. Uh, but it's like Frank said too. Like some of this comes in there as well, that we have to make a choice. Either we breathe smoke all summer long. Those are the risks we have. Or we put fire on the ground when we can manage it, and and so we have smoke for a week. And a lot of times that's our burn window is a week, maybe 2 weeks. And so yes, we have some smoke for 2 weeks, but we end up with way less in the long term. And I think that's part of the process that we need to have. And like I said, fire schools, education, get people on board with what's happening.
Thank you so much, Jack. And Frank, what are your thoughts on how to move forward safely and legally?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there's too much I can add to two gentlemen that have discussed it in pretty good length. Maybe just a couple thoughts. I think one thing they both kind of touched on, but maybe I'll just expand a little bit, has to do with that local knowledge. Utilizing that local knowledge to, have the timing of it. I mean, I have the privilege of managing this tenure across multiple First Nation traditional territories, and there's, although their knowledge, their cultural or traditional ecological knowledge on using fire in the landscape has been lost quite a bit because it was held with a lot of the elders, and a lot of the elders didn't get a chance to pass it on to the younger generation because they just didn't have the interest. So I know we're definitely struggling with that piece, but I think that's a really important one, is tie into that local knowledge. What is a good time to burn? what is the best location to start? I mean, there's definitely a local expertise that's not the typical science-based focus. So I think we have to tie into that to be successful. Another piece maybe is just, sometimes you just got to take it slow and just have an area that you can have really good success with, and don't push it, right? Just get that part done. That demonstrates that trust that you need to gain from the community in order to go bigger, or maybe start up in a new area. And then perhaps the biggest one for me, running an area-based tenure, is you got to really think at the landscape scale and at the landscape level, because I mean, here, that's what these fires do and have done and will continue to do, regardless of what we want them to do. So like for us, having that landscape fire plan, I mean, we're doing lots of different types of, I guess, activities beyond wildfire to set the landscape up for that fire and for that prescribed fire activity. So yeah, I guess that's all I've got.
Thank you, Chance, Frank, and Jack. That was really informative. And now we still have a few minutes left here. I haven't seen any questions in the chat yet, but maybe some people in the audience, this discussion stirred some thoughts, or you came with some thoughts. Now would be your time to, maybe bring forward your question, or if you would like to hear something else that we discuss in terms of fire on the land and the experience of the three gentlemen here.
I'm not seeing anybody populate the chat here, Nadia, but a question that we could say is, what has been your most memorable or favorite experience with fire in 60 seconds or less?
Yeah.
Is that fair to ask, Nadia?
Yeah, I like that question.
Well, probably one of the most memorable for me. One of the most memorable for me is my dad and myself. We were burning in our Crown Range. This is quite a few years ago, and there's a Lindy Creek runs through the middle of it, and so we were using the creek as our starting point, and we were using the timber as our fire break, which seems a little interesting in today's world. Things have changed somewhat environmentally, but clearly the timber would stop our fire in the early spring. And we were burning in some quite a bit of grass, yeah, mixed in with Arctic birch and willow, and we had a really strong wind. It was beautiful. It was perfect. And I went up the creek. Dad was down the creek, and we were both throwing out matches, and our fires joined at the top, and they were coming back on us. And so my dad and I, we rode together to meet each other. We stopped lighting and we just discussed our situation, because on the one side we had a fairly big creek all full of beaver dams, and on the other side we had two fronts of fire coming toward us. And so we just discussed our options, what we were going to do. And so we just watched for a while to see if there was a break that we could ride through the fire, and that wasn't coming very conducive to us. So as the fire got a little closer, we just rode down into the beaver dams, and we couldn't get up the other side, but we huddled against the far side of the bank there till the fire passed, and then we rode back out onto the black. So that was probably one of the most memorable situations that we had. Since I have the mic here, I'd like to say this in addition to fire and our landscape and cattle. I think all the cattle and the fire really help to manage our soil health, grass health, and also the land. So when we put fire on the land and when we put cattle on the land, we do certain changes that makes our land more fire friendly. And when I say friendly, I'm not saying that it it becomes more dangerous. That becomes less dangerous. When we have cattle on the land and we have fire in a rotational aspect, we actually seriously mitigate or drastically mitigate the potential of a wildfire as we change the duff layer in getting more grass, more healthy grass, and it's less absorbent. The fire doesn't go in the ground like it does in other areas. So if anybody has questions on that, I'm sure open to talk about that as well.
Excellent. Thank you, Jack. Frank, would you like to your most memorable experience?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I obviously don't have as much opportunity to play with fire as Jack has had, but the one prescribed fire I had the opportunity to participate in and be involved in. I think probably the most memorable piece for me was the contracting community really coming together to support it, and that was huge. I think for the success of the team that was hired to carry out the activity, but also just knowing that everybody was there to support the whole process. I think that was really big. And you don't really realize that until later on when people start talking about it in the community, and you hear that, and then later on, it kind of passes and life goes on, and then you have another fire, a natural wildfire or lightning caused wildfire that's heading towards the community, and suddenly everybody's pretty happy that you actually carried out some of those activities strategically in places. So I think the combination of just that reaffirmation that happens as a result of those activities being carried out.
Nice. Thank you, Frank. And Chance, what about you? Do you have any memories, fond memories?
Yeah, no, it's I would just like touch on community involvement. Whether it's prescribed or or a wildfire, it brings the community together, and it's it's never a bad thing. Everybody just kind of works together, and no, it's nothing bad to say about that.
Well, thank you all. Any questions? It's a very quiet crowd. I will in the chat, if I can figure it out, just put a link if you're interested in attending a fire school, or if you have already attended a fire school and might like to be part of a prescribed fire. We hope to do 2 more for this project that we're working on with prescribed fire, with Dr. Sonia Leverkus and Dr. Jillian Baynard. And so if you've taken this school and are interested in getting some practical experience, or if you're interested in a school, then we do have an expression of interest link on our Peace River Forge Association website. And again, it's in the chat, or if you can't access the chat, just connect with me later on and I can send that to you.
Yeah, no, yeah, I can just say too that within our projects that some of the things that we've done here within our prescribed burn, we've done some extensive different research plots and projects that we've done over the years. We've logged some stuff and then used fire to take it from a logging slash to a beautiful grass. And we've had some really good success in some of these things. And so I do think that the opportunity and the potential for this is huge for us moving forward. I do.
Yeah, let's have some good fire on the land. We're coming up here on the hour. I don't know, Frank or Chance, do you want to share any closing thoughts as well? You're all good?
Yeah, I think we've kind of covered all bases.
Excellent. Well, thank you again to Jack, Frank, and Chance to take this time and come on here and kind of just share. It's always really valuable for everybody else to be able to hear that. So thank you so much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thanks, Nadia.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.